Good Tuesday morning to you. Welcome on into Morning JOX, JOX 94.5. Good morning to everybody but Philadelphia Eagles fans. You way to blow it last night. Sweet Lord, have mercy. Everything going your way. And I will say, Nick Sirianni, I'm still fuming on how that game ended last night. Because if you would have told me, by the way Atlanta was playing up until probably 2 minutes left in the ball game, I wouldn't have believed that Kirk Cousins had enough time. Philadelphia won. Okay, so you'll go for it in the first quarter in the red zone on fourth down, and then Saquon Barkley, when the team needed you the most,
you catch the ball, man.
You gotta catch it, man. You have to catch it. Like the Philadelphia Eagles, they had me so hot last night. One, I picked them to win the game. And two, they had so many opportunities to get it done that they just kept giving Atlanta chances. And then Kirk Cousins goes back into the, to 27-year-old Kirk Cousins and goes out there and balls for the last 2 minutes of the game. And it's like, okay, well, another thing too, I had Drake London for anytime touchdown score. Had to stay up for a long time to see that ticket go in. But hey, we'll take it how it is. But
I guess you don't listen to three-man front because we had the Atlanta Falcons as a gimme pick last week, so it pays to listen, man.
My apologies. It's I just didn't see this one coming. I really did. And the way that the game was going, Philadelphia they just make me so mad. They made me so mad last night because there's no reason why the game should have been as close as it was. But also it makes me think that maybe Philadelphia just isn't as good as I thought they should be. And I don't even know where to begin, where to start, because it's Nick Sirianni doesn't seem as aggressive as he once was, or he's either overly aggressive. And then when you have Tom on your side, you decide to throw it on third down to Saquon Barkley. He drops the pass. You pretty much saved Atlanta a timeout. You kick a field goal just to go up by 5. And then all Atlanta does is go down and score, win the game on the field goal, and then intercepts Jalen Hurts on the ensuing next possession. So everything that went wrong, that could have gone wrong for Philadelphia, absolutely went wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a pretty game for either side. Both offenses looked pretty rough at times. To be fair to the Eagles, they were missing A.J. Brown, who's their best player. So I'll give him a little bit of slack there, and I will give credit to, again, the narrative for Kirk Cousins, as bad as he may have looked at times. And I mean, we were texting during the game last night. Both getting choked up this morning.
I know, man.
But we were texting during the game last night, and there was one point where it was like, I don't know if this is it for Kirk anymore. Like, this just isn't looking the same, and it might be a rough season here in Atlanta. And then he just kind of flipped a switch, and the knock on him for the longest time was that in primetime games he just didn't show up and he couldn't pull it out. And so for him to be able to go and drive down the field and get that touchdown at the end that ultimately won it, I will say I was a little happy to see Kirk get that, because I was like, he doesn't have a lot of these on his resume, and so these certainly mean something. But yeah, I think a lot of people probably leaving that game yesterday with, I don't know if it improves your opinion of the Falcons a whole lot, but it probably lessens your opinion of the Eagles just a little bit. And like you said, I mean, this is a team that they look completely different than the team from a couple years ago that was in the Super Bowl. And I know you've lost some pieces since then. And I know Jason Kelce was a huge part of that offense, and now he's gone. But it just, it feels different. And I like Jalen Hurts. I mean, I still think he's a solid quarterback, but I think we can also all agree that the season he had 2 years ago was you're not going to get that probably ever again from Jalen Hurts. And, I think we all kind of knew that when he signed the big contract. It was, all right, well, you're kind of banking this on one good season that he's had here in Philadelphia. And, he's still a nice quarterback, can add a lot with his legs, but yeah, he's not an elite quarterback, in my opinion. I will just put it that way.
After watching yesterday, I can see where you come with that.
I think he's very good, but I don't think
Right.
he's one of the top guys in the NFL like
That's
he
exactly
was a couple of years ago.
Exactly how I feel about Trevor Lawrence. That's exactly how I feel about Trevor Lawrence.
Oh, yeah, but Jalen Hurts, I definitely better than Trevor Lawrence.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I think for Jalen, I don't even know where, like, he's very useful with his legs. And a lot of the issues that we saw when he was, at Alabama and Oklahoma is just kind of accuracy in certain situations. It's not like he was, completely inaccurate last night. He went 23 for 30 for 183, but it seems like with all the talent that he has, they don't take the shots down the field to really open up. And it may just be a Nick Sirianni thing, but if you're going to pay Jalen that much money, you definitely want him to perform a lot better than he did yesterday. And I think, he had 85 rushing yards as well, but I don't know. For the collection of talent that Philadelphia has, you would think they'd be able to execute a little bit better. Like Saquon Barkley, he'll be the first one to tell you he's got to make that catch. It's literally in his hands. There, you get the first down, you put the game on ice. Essentially, if you don't score, like you put the game on ice, but then you give Atlanta another opportunity offensively. And for Kirk Cousins, one, I thought Kyle Pitts would probably start to show that he's one of these guys. I think we're probably going to have a real conversation about what Kyle Pitts is. And I'm not going to sit here and try to, just put him down. But for somebody with the natural talent that he has, you would think that his stat sheet would look a lot better. Like if you just physically looked at a tight end, it's like, oh yeah, that dude, he looks different. I don't understand why he doesn't get the ball as much. And also for Kirk Cousins, like if there's a safety blanket that you would want, maybe it was Darnell Mooney for all we know. Like we finally get a chance to see what he could do as opposed to what he was in Chicago. But for Drake London and Kyle Pitts, to me, those are the guys that you drafted extremely early, but their impact still is very minimal in the grand scheme of it all for as talented as they are and for where they were drafted. And it just doesn't feel like you're getting a return on investment from either one of those guys. And I know Drake London's young, but Kyle Pitts has been in the league, 4 years now, and it still just doesn't feel like he's a focal point of the offense. And I don't know what Atlanta's identity really is, but you got Bijan Robinson back there. And if as many touches as you can give Seven, the better.
Well, Atlanta just doesn't make sense, and they haven't made sense for a number of years because, yeah, like you said, I mean, you spent, either 3 straight or 3 out of 4 first-round picks on a wide receiver, a tight end, and a running back, and last night, Kyle Pitts has 3 catches for 20 yards. That's not it. Drake London, I mean, he had the touchdown pass at the end, and that's great, but that's your number one guy. He had 6 catches for 54 yards. And then Bijan had a good game. He had 97 yards, but still he touched the ball, or he had 14 carries, and that's it.
Right.
So it's like, that's very efficient, but okay, if my running back's got 97 yards of 14 carries, I'm probably giving him 20-plus carries right there. It just doesn't make sense why you would spend that draft cap. Because if you're gonna go spend those first-round picks on offensive talent, go bolster an offensive line. Use them on offensive line or something, or go get a pass rusher or something like. If you're not going to incorporate them and make them the focal point of the offense, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I mean, you just go, and I know that, I'm not trying to compare these guys to what you had in Minnesota, but I mean, you go and look at the offense there with the Vikings with Kirk Cousins and, I mean, Justin Jefferson was breaking records. I mean, TJ Hawkinson was was one of the more productive tight ends in all of the NFL. And I mean, that doesn't even, what Jordan Addison did last year and guys like that, the complementary pieces. I mean, that was a viable offense with 2 good wide receivers and a good tight end in Minnesota every year that Kirk Cousins was there. And now you have a guy like Drake London who's going to get 6 catches. And, it just doesn't make sense. Like your best targets and guys that have a lot of talent and the reasons they were taken in the top 10 of the NFL draft and you're just not getting them the ball. I don't know. Because that's what everyone thought. Okay, you're spending all this money on a quarterback, so surely you're now going to double down on the guys that you drafted in the first round and make them, the main part of the offense, and that just hasn't happened yet. So it's only 2 games. They got time to figure it out. Kirk definitely looked better last night than he did against the Steelers in week 1. That was just an ugly game, but yeah, that one's going to hurt for the Eagles. You should have had that one. And if you're the Falcons, hopefully this, gives you some motivation moving forward, because that was a pretty good team that you just beat.
Yeah.
But, you got to be able to piece it together from here on out. And especially for the Falcons, I mean, you coming into the year was, okay, you're in the worst division in the league. You shouldn't have too much trouble with Kirk Cousins now working for a playoff spot. Now, I mean, that division does not look like the worst in the league. Granted, the Panthers look like the worst team, but Saints look like the best team through 2 games, and the Buccaneers, they weren't messing around either. They're also 2-0, and they beat the Lions.
I know it.
So,
yeah, that whole division looks a little bit different than what I thought it was going to look like in the beginning of the year, but
2 free wins for everyone, though, because you get to play Carolina twice.
Yeah. And speaking of Carolina, I know this is going to hurt a lot of Alabama fans' hearts, but Bryce Young has been benched. If you saw the information yesterday, they are going in the direction of Andy Dalton for this week. One, I think this is kind of a double-edged sword, because one, Bryce is young, but he has shown that he's not as consistent as he was when he was in college. And also, two, Carolina hasn't put anything around him to help him in any way, shape, or form. Like the franchise within itself, he's 2-16 as a starter. Terrible record. But also, when you see what happened against the Chargers, it leaves a lot to be desired, because you can't miss on a bubble. Like, you see that, and it's okay, man. All right, now we can't really knock that on, an organizational decision. That's just a bad throw. You got to be able to make that throw in your sleep. You should be able to underhand that to Adam Thielen on the bubble, especially on third down.
Yeah, he just looks cooked. Like,
right.
Really, like, he just doesn't look like he has any confidence when he goes out there, that whether it's a problem with he doesn't have confidence that the receivers are on the same page with him, or he just doesn't have the confidence that he can deliver the ball. Like, because, I mean, that was the thing at Alabama, right? I mean, he was so accurate.
Yep.
Like, he's just one of the very few quarterbacks that when you watched him play, you never doubted, or at least I never doubted, that he was going to make the right decision. You just knew, all right, he's going to put the ball exactly where it needs to be. And 99% of the time, at Alabama at least, that's what he did. And now, like you're saying, like, he can't even just hit the fundamental routine throws, let alone the shots down the field that we saw when he was in college. And it's sad. I feel for him. I mean, look, if you watch the Bears and Texans game the other night, you can clearly see what a highly touted first round or number 1 overall pick that doesn't have an offensive line around him looks like. Caleb Williams got sacked 7 times. He looked terrible. And, I'm not going to I'm not going to cover for Bryce, because he has just been bad.
Right.
But he's also in the worst situation, arguably, in the NFL, right? Like, that franchise is a complete and total mess right now. And it's just crazy that they did this so quickly, because he has a new offensive coordinator. He's in a new offense in this year than he was last year. And you're giving up on him after 2 games. Granted, I understand it's been really, really ugly, but like, does Andy Dalton, do you think you're going to start winning games with Andy Dalton? Because I don't. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, you're not barely losing games. You're getting embarrassed in these games because of how bad you are. And so if you just don't want to watch that product on the field anymore, I get it, but I feel like you probably have more to gain from at least playing Bryce Young for the year. If he's really this bad the rest of the way, then you have an answer, and you're spending your first pick on a quarterback next year. And if he starts to figure it out, then maybe you have something cooking. But it certainly seems like he's going to be looking for another opportunity somewhere else before too long, though.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Do you still? It's honestly, I know it's early, but do you still think Bryce is a starting quarterback in the NFL?
I mean, not right now. He needs to go. I mean, ideally, he would find himself in a go to an offensive minded coach. Find yourself in a good offense where you can sit and, not to. I guess it's an easy comparison, but I mean, almost like what happened with Mac Jones, right? Like, you're a starting quarterback. You've shown that, okay, maybe you're a starting caliber quarterback, but like on the low end of that in the league.
Yeah.
But at the very end of the day, like, you're at least a competent backup. And I mean, as we've seen with, the Geno Smiths of the world and what we're seeing from Sam Darnold right now, like, I mean, they're not the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but they've gone from really disastrous starts to their career to being solid,
Yep.
starting, decent starting quarterback. So maybe that's what happens with Bryce, or who knows? Maybe he's just, let's be honest, the NFL just, it's hard, man. And some people, it just, it doesn't work out.
And the crazy thing is, I made a tweet yesterday that he's on this. He's basically Marcus Mariota 2.0. One, I guess I offended a lot of people.
That's kind of disrespectful to Marcus Mariota, honestly.
And that's where I was like, okay, people have revisionist history of really where Marcus Mariota was as an NFL quarterback. One, he
wasn't this bad.
He had the record for most touchdowns for a rookie in his debut. He had 4 touchdowns in the first half in his first ever game in the NFL. He went 3-13, he was 3-13 his rookie year, and he had 3 consecutive winning seasons after that. And people were like, "Oh, you wish he was just that." They were telling me about his college stats of like, "Okay, yeah, you wish Marcus was as good as Bryce." I'm not going to argue that I would choose Bryce Young over Marcus Mariota, even in their Heisman years. But you know what? They both have Heisman trophies. So at least for one season, both of them dogs were good in college. We're talking about the league. And I literally said it's copy and paste the exact same thing for Marcus. Is they didn't build anything around him. And once they realized they could just hand it to Derrick Henry 50 times a game, he was already benched for Ryan Tannehill. And I was sitting there, that's the only point I was making. People were like, oh my God, well, Bryce was playing against lesser competition in college. I'm talking about the league, dog. We're talking literally what he has done in 18 games as a starter. He just doesn't look like a starting quarterback right now. No, I'm not going to sit here and say that Carolina isn't to blame as well, because they haven't built anything around him to elevate his game. But also, you're one of 32. You're looked at as the number 1 overall pick to take people out of these situations. No matter how you slice it up, you say it's fair, it's unfair. It's the same conversation we were having with Matthew Stafford for 13 years in Detroit. And now all of a sudden he wins the Super Bowl and everybody's saying he's a Hall of Famer. Well, maybe it just takes a little time, but also you have to put pieces around these quarterbacks to elevate them as well. So Carolina is just as guilty as Bryce Young's performance is for the Carolina Panthers. Like it's 2-2. But also, if you're replacing him with Andy Dalton, it's because he has experience. No matter how you slice it up, Andy Dalton's played a lot. And I'm not the biggest Andy Dalton supporter. But also, if you're in this situation 2 games in, you're already taking out your first number 1 overall pick after a year and 2 games into his next year. Okay, well, either you don't believe in him or you just don't think it's going to get better with him. So I think that the Panthers are kind of at a crossroads right now, because what if Andy Dalton does go red rifle and start lighting it up again? Maybe he has like the Sam Darnold resurgence there in NFC South. Then the organization as a whole is sitting there like, okay, well, what do we do with Bryce moving forward? So,
but here's the thing. Do you really want to do that? And see, that's the other part of this, is I understand that this isn't, the most popular take, maybe, because I get it. You're supposed to want to win and try to win. Okay, let's say Andy Dalton goes in there and he's decent. All right, now you find yourself in a spot where you win 6 games this year. Well, now you're not getting the first overall pick in the draft, and so now it's harder for you to rebuild your franchise, because Andy Dalton's not the long-term fix, but he was good enough to win you enough games to get you out of position to draft a guy that can actually come in and change it's just, again, I understand, maybe not the most popular opinion. I just feel like you might as well write it out with Bryce, because either he's going to get better and you're going to feel optimistic about the future, or he's going to continue to be this bad and you're going to have the number 1 pick in the draft. And it's unfortunate that that's the situation you're in as a franchise, but that's the situation you're in as a franchise. And that's the general manager's fault. That's that's the coaching staff's fault. That's the ownership's fault. And that just seems like the best way forward for me. But, if Panthers fans want to watch Andy Dalton, 38-year-old Andy Dalton, go, have at it.
Have at it. Yes, please. You can have him. You can absolutely have him. And really and truly, the way the Titans are looking, I probably would choose Andy Dalton over Will Levis right now. But that's a conversation we'll have on another day. 205-834-9450. Do you think the Carolina Panthers are doing the right thing by benching Bryce Young? Should Bryce Young just go in there and get his lumps? Do you think he's still a starter in the league? We'll discuss that and more. We'll take a look at the SEC slate for week 4 in the season, and also have a discussion of who is the worst team in the SEC right now. We want to hear from you. 205-834-9450. 9450. You can text or call in. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. Matchbox 20. I don't even know.
This is a band that everybody hates now.
Who is it?
Imagine Dragons.
That's Imagine Dragons?
Yeah, when they were good.
Yeah, I would have never guessed.
Yeah, they had one good album. And then they...
That sounds pretty good right there. I ain't gonna lie. 205-834-9450. Welcome back into Morning JOX. JOX 94.5, Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, and you as well. We appreciate everybody with your text messages as we are discussing the Carolina Panthers and if this was the right move by benching Bryce at this time. And y'all are definitely saying with your chest. I will say that. We had somebody text in and says, I take Andy Dalton over Daniel Jones as well. We'll find out who the worst team in the SEC, which is something I asked, I teased during the break as well, is in this weekend in the Toilet Bowl, Florida versus Mississippi State. I think State gets the win. Yeah. It's crazy to believe. It's crazy to think that at one point we would automatically say it's Vanderbilt, and within 3 games we're
they even lost their last game, and I'm still not going to say that they're the worst. Yeah, no, I mean it's got to be Mississippi State, right? I mean again, man, I feel bad for Mississippi State, like
Toledo,
the last few years for Mississippi State have been brutal. Like, let's be honest. Going back to the unfortunate passing of Mike Leach, which was a horrible situation, and then to go to Zach Arnett, who, let's be honest, like that was not an ideal situation. It just something had to happen after Mike Leach, and so he gets put in an unfortunate situation that's not really fair. He doesn't really have a great chance to succeed. So then he's out, and now Jeff Lebby comes in, and it's, oh, great, you're coming in the year that Texas and Oklahoma join, and we're not in divisions anymore, and it's just a free-for-all, and yeah, it's tough, man. I think you can, I like Jeff Lebby. I think that you can get somewhere with him, and I think that offensively speaking, he can make Mississippi State a very exciting football team to watch in due time. It's just... it's going to take a little while for this program to get there, and we're seeing that.
And I don't think Blake Shapen is a bad quarterback.
No,
this is probably the most depleted we've seen Mississippi State in a long time, and it's a whole identity change. It's new, and I hate the fact that Toledo came into Starkville and they handed it to them. And you just don't expect that from a Mississippi State team. You would think because of what we've been able to see defensively for Mississippi State, it just felt like they're the team that doesn't mind a fist fight. They may not have, the biggest of guys. Like, you just got to think Jeffrey Simmons was their defensive tackle at one time. Fletcher Cox has been there. They have had some dudes for Mississippi State on the defensive side. And now they don't play with the same edge. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And like you said, they've gone through just horrible circumstances to find themselves in the positions that they are. But also, when you look at Florida, they don't really have the excuses that, I'm not even going to say excuses for Mississippi State, but they don't have the same reasons of why they're bad as opposed to Mississippi State, whereas Billy Napier, he's been there. You've had the Anthony Richardson project for a couple years. You've had Graham Mertz. And now you're in this mode of, all right, we thought coming into the season, the month of November was going to be brutal for you. But now after what we've seen the first couple weeks of the season, this Florida team is pretty much just scratching and clawing for a win at this point. And it's not going to be many on this schedule for them, because you look at even that UCF game now looks completely different. UCF knocking off TCU there in the last minutes over the weekend on Friday. But I think for right now, if we had to say who the worst team is in the SEC, it's a battle between Mississippi State and Florida. And it's kind of a gap even in between. Like South Carolina, they probably in the preseason early on in the offseason, we were thinking, I don't know how this team's going to look.
I don't think Florida or Mississippi State's doing to LSU what South Carolina just did.
Exactly. Yeah. So man, there's kind of a gap between the worst, the good, and the great in every single level. So, I mean, because I don't necessarily think Kentucky is in that conversation of being one of the worst teams. They just don't have, they haven't put it all together. Defensively, I think they're one of the stronger teams in the SEC. It's just they have no offense. They don't know what their identity is offensively. Because if you could play Georgia the way that they did, it gives you a little bit of hope of, all right, we're just a few pieces here and there away from really turning this thing around. But also, if you're living and dying with Brock Vandagriff as your quarterback, he has his good moments. He has some bad moments. And I just don't know what it's going to look like moving forward, but I kind of have a feeling of what Florida and Mississippi State are going to look like moving forward. It's just not going to be very good. Like, they're not going to sneak up on anybody to me after what we've seen the first 3 weeks of the season. I just don't know if they're going to be able to overcome everything that they have in front of them and still have a successful season. Like I think both of these teams are going to end up under 500 at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a right now. I mean, there's a real chance that this could be, the last game that Florida wins this year. I mean, the UCF game's interesting. I know you got Kentucky later in the season. But once you get through those, I mean, you're kind of in that gauntlet. And Florida State, I guess that game's in play now as well. That's a different conversation. But I mean, seriously, like when you're Florida and you look at these games, like these are games you have to win, because I know it sounds absurd to sit here and say Florida could legitimately go 2-10 or 3-9, but they can. And if they lose this game, then what? That doesn't give me any confidence that they're going to go and beat UCF, or they're going to go and be able to beat Kentucky or even Florida State. So they're in a bad spot. It feels like the Billy Napier news. I mean, it feels like it's going to come at any day now, right? And it's an ugly situation. And that's where, while I would agree that Florida and Mississippi State are the two worst teams in the SEC right now, I think the programs are also in different spots, right? Like Mississippi State, nobody's sitting here with Mississippi State going like, what is going on at Mississippi State? It's just, they were put in a very difficult situation a couple years ago, and they're still navigating out of that. Whereas with Florida, it's, all right, when is somebody going to figure this out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now you're on a stretch of, I mean, it's been 14 years since you were really relevant. Like, I know you played in a couple SEC championship games since then, but it wasn't particularly competitive. Like in 2020, you gave Alabama a run for their money, which was impressive. But I mean, those Florida teams and the Will Muschamp Florida teams and stuff that were going to the SEC championship, that was just because the East was so bad those years. It was, okay, well, right, yeah, this 9-win Florida team's going to go to Atlanta. Just the fact that program has been down like it has, and maybe it's like, maybe it's next in line. Like we've seen Tennessee kind of come back from the dead, and now they're really relevant again. Texas is the number one team in the country right now. So maybe Florida's the next kind of one of those historic, I guess, programs that when you think of college football as a whole, you think of them as an elite program. Maybe they're the next one to come back. Maybe this next coaching hire is going to turn things around. But I think Mississippi State's a worse team right now, but the program as a whole at Florida is just a complete disaster. I don't think anyone would argue that, that's probably the biggest mess of a program right now, because, I mean, you're about to have spent a lot of money to get rid of a guy that, was supposed to come in and save the program. And I just really hope, if you're a Florida fan, I really hope Lane says yes. Because if that doesn't happen, then it's going to get real interesting.
I'll tell you who, if Lane does say no, I'll tell you who they need to call. Somebody that's in the state already. Coaching South Florida. You want offense. You want it to, they want the run and gun. They want it to be pretty. They want it to be explosive. I'd shoot Alex Golish what you doing, big head?
I just feel like for Florida, they're going to go, well, we did this last time, right? We went and got the group of 5 coach that everyone was hyped up about, and it didn't work out. True. So I feel like and maybe they do go that route, because I think, as we talked about, last week, I think Golish is going to be a great coach.
Facts.
For a long time. But yeah, it'll be interesting, man.
It will be indeed. 205-834-9450. We'll see you on the Jocks text line. We'll get to your text messages, your calls, yes, your reaction of who the worst team in the SEC is right now, 3 weeks into the season, and also some news on Bryce Young being benched for Andy Dalton and the Carolina Panthers. We'll get your reaction on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. 6:38 here on Morning JOX, JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, and you as well. 205-834-9450. Begin your reaction to the questions that we have earlier. Do you think the Carolina Panthers are doing the right thing by benching Bryce Young? Do you think Bryce Young is still a starting quarterback in the NFL? Also taking a look at the SEC of who is the worst team so far. But definitely getting your reaction. We had somebody text in, as you can as well, 205-834-9450 on the JOX text line. Somebody texted in and said it's Vanderbilt. It's not close. They just lost to Georgia State.
Yeah, but if you've watched Vanderbilt this year, they're different.
They are.
And I'm not saying that they're going to go out there and win, 7 games or anything this year, but from what we thought they were to what they actually are, no. Put Mississippi State and Vanderbilt on a field right now, I'm taking Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and if you're Clark Lee, this is probably the best Vanderbilt team you've had since you've been there.
Oh, yeah.
It's
no
not
doubt
even
about
close.
That. No.
And they look like a football team. They legit look like a good team. Diego Pavia, he's tough, man. I got to give him a lot of props, and I thought he was going to, maybe stumble out of the gate a little bit just with the competition level. But I'm interested to see what Vandy does in SEC play, and I'm interested to see what this Vanderbilt team looks like. And I understand that Georgia State loss is bad, but they happen. You could have lost to Toledo.
Yeah. By 24 or
right.
whatever it was, yeah.
Yeah, you could have lost to Toledo. We have another text message and says, does Lane finish the year at Ole Miss, or does he go to Florida before the playoffs begin? If Ole Miss is in the playoffs, Lane Kiffin will coach that thing till the wheels fall off.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's like a joke or not, because if you remember when he was at Alabama and they were in the playoff and he left in between the semifinal game and the national championship game, and Alabama then lost that national championship game because Lane Kiffin wasn't there and Bo Scarborough snapped his leg. So yeah, he has a track record of being distracted when he has another job on the table and maybe not doing the best job at his current spot. And because you go back to the, what was it, 2 years ago, I guess, when you started off, they started off like 6-0, 7-0. And then you had that collapse at the end of the year, and then the Auburn rumors were circulating, and it was, so maybe you were a little distracted, and that's why this team didn't perform super well down the stretch, and then he ended up not going to Auburn. And so, yes, there is a track record with Lane Kiffin of him maybe not doing the best job when he's already got one foot out the door.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, if he takes Ole Miss to the playoff, I mean, I think he'll be along for the ride there.
Drake texts in and says, if Billy loses on Saturday, his ass doesn't need to get back on the plane heading back to Florida. It's going to be...
Yeah, if you lose this one, that's going to sting. That one's going to look worse than... I mean, it was already bad with A&M and their backup quarterback at home. But against Mississippi State, yeah, I don't know if he survives that one if they lose.
Yeah, and then going back to the Bryce Young situation about him and the Carolina Panthers. Cole texts in, not Cole Kubley, he texts in and says, if you swap the two quarterbacks, does Bryce Young take the Titans farther than Will Levis? I think they're both in contention of being probably the worst quarterbacks in the league right now. I don't necessarily think Bryce, he doesn't move the needle. But I think he doesn't make as dumb plays as Will Levis.
No, but Will Levis also makes throws that
yes.
Bryce Young's not made, so it's kind of a given.
Yeah, they probably come one.
You're not winning much with either of them, let's be honest.
Trust me, we're not winning at all.
Yeah,
we're
not going to win a whole
we're
lot
not
with either
winning
of those
at
guys
all
right now.
And they bring up a great point. He says Bryce hasn't been developed. He's like, look, somebody texted in and said Bryce has not been developed. Look where Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield are, and they both shared snaps in Carolina, which is
that's
fair.
something people brought up. They're both undefeated and having a good season elsewhere, but it is very important. I mean, you look at quarterbacks in the NFL like Patrick, and who knows, because Patrick Mahomes is so good, maybe he would have just been this good anywhere, but I feel comfortable saying he's not Patrick Mahomes if he's not there with Andy Reid and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and getting to learn under Alex Smith for a year. And, look at Brock Purdy, right? Like, he got thrown in because of injury, but that dude was the last pick in the draft, and he's a starting quarterback that he took his team to the Super Bowl last year. I don't think that's because Brock Purdy is the second coming of Tom Brady. I think it's because he has a really good head coach and a lot of really good players around him, and he makes it work with that. So, the situation is everything, right? Look at Bryce and CJ Stroud.
Yep.
CJ Stroud went to an organization that wasn't great, but DeMeco Ryans is one of the best coaches in the NFL, and he turned that thing around quick. And now look, I mean, you have one of the best young teams in the NFL, whereas on the other side of things, you have the worst team in the NFL with Bryce Young and the Panthers. They don't have the personnel, they don't have the coaching staff. So that doesn't mean that none of it is Bryce's fault, because he has just played poorly. But you're wherever you land, that ultimately is the biggest determining factor, in my opinion, and kind of how your career goes, at least early on.
Yep. Barry from Anniston, he texts in and says, I'm a huge Bama fan, a big Bryce Young fan, but if I'm being honest, I had doubts about Bryce in the league, mainly because of his size. And I also think that plays a part into it too. Like it feels, when you watch Bryce, it feels like he's putting everything in every single throw. It's probably because he has to get it over the defense, and he really don't know what he's seeing. Like, he probably is not seeing the clearest of coverages as well.
Yeah, I mean, it probably doesn't help, but I also just watched the Rams game this past weekend when Kyler Murray absolutely torched the Rams for like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and they're the same size. So,
Yeah. At some point, talent's got to.
I'm just saying, Drew Brees was the same height.
Yep. And you see what he was able to do.
I'd say he's one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah, absolutely. 205-834-9450. Continue to get your reaction on the other side. Is Florida pretty much the worst team? As Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC so far? Also get your reactions to Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers going their separate ways as far as starting Andy Dalton this week. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. 6:49 here on Morning JOX. JOX 94.5, Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, and you as well. Our wonderful listeners, 205-834-9450. You can text or call in here for a few more moments as we set you up for McElroy and Kublik in the morning. Oh, man, Bama hater up early this morning. He says, we all know Mississippi State and Vandy. Don't say Vandy. Are the two worst teams in the SEC, but what are the two best teams in the SEC? He says Tennessee and Texas. And I'd actually agree with you, Bama hater. I think Tennessee and Texas are the two best teams in the SEC right now. I'd probably have, if I had to say like the top five right now, I'd say Texas, Tennessee. I'd have Alabama at 3, Georgia, and Ole Miss. That's probably my top 5 right now.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I would definitely say I've been the most impressed with Texas. So far, they've just looked out of all of the, I guess, the elite teams in college football. They've looked the best. Like, I've had the least questions about them. And even now with the injury to Quinn, like, if that's something that does end up extending into, if we're talking this is like a 3, 4, 5, 6 week injury, then maybe that changes things. But for right now, I mean, I'm operating under the basis that he's out for a week, maybe 2.
Right.
And what we saw from Arch is pretty good. But it's hard not to love Tennessee, man. We will get a little bit of a test against Oklahoma. I think Tennessee's gonna handle that business without too much trouble. That's just my opinion. But
a 7.5 is a lock.
They look really good. I will say I think NC State's maybe not the team that we thought they were going to be,
yep.
And so that wasn't quite the test you expected. But I mean, hey, you did. I know again it was Kennesaw State, but I mean, anytime you put up, it's not easy to put up 70 on anybody, and that offense just looks like a different animal, and that defense has been lights out. So when they step it up, we'll see. But yeah.
And now he's okay. Now Bama haters locked in. Says Damian, when Bama barely beat South Florida last season and 2 Saturdays ago. Well, 2 Saturdays ago they beat them by 26. I don't know if that's barely winning. Sweet Jesus.
So we didn't watch the game this past weekend.
Right. A win is a win was the slogan for Bama fans. So how does Georgia using their a win as a win card beating Kentucky 13-12? How does that equate to an automatic W for Bama and Georgia? Well, the last time I saw Alabama and Georgia play, even if you want to say it wasn't the best Alabama team, they beat Georgia in the SEC title game. When it all matters.
Yeah, I mean, we have a long time to talk about that game. We will see how it ends up. But
yeah,
yes,
for sure.
Let's just say in recent memory, Georgia has not played particularly well against Alabama in terms of, I mean, they've been good games, but in terms of being able to win those games. And I mean, it's fair to have criticisms. I have questions about Alabama. I have questions about Georgia. But based on the last impression that I have of these two teams, my impression of Alabama was significantly better than my impression of Georgia. But
that I agree.
I will also say I don't think that Alabama's played anybody as good as Clemson was. I think Clemson's better than Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give that to Georgia. I think they played the best team out of the two, and they dominated them.
Yep.
But you've also saw against a Kentucky team that, and let's just say it's an SEC road game against a team that's not as good as you, that you struggled mightily against. And now you got to go on the road against a team that's as good as you. And we'll see how that works out. Maybe Georgia goes into Tuscaloosa and beats Alabama by 21. And we're sitting here 2 weeks from now going, man, Georgia's clearly the best team in the country. That's possible. It's also possible that Alabama goes in there and takes care of business. And, we're sitting here going, okay, Alabama and Texas are the two best teams in the SEC.
Yeah. And then Dale texts and he says, I'm sorry, but an onside kick in the first quarter when you're up 30 to nothing on an inferior opponent, I will never hope Tennessee wins again. Classless moves. Hey man, you gotta practice in-game scenarios. You never know when you need it.
Again, you're not going to win any sportsmanship awards, but you're paying that school a lot of money to come and lose. Like they know what they're coming to do, and I'm not saying it's what I would have done, but
yeah. What if they hit an onside kick? What if they hit an onside kick against, Alabama on the third Saturday in October? They're going to come back to the Kent State game and say, hey, they practiced this early on in the season. You never know. Let's go to the phone lines, talk to War Dam Don this morning before we get out of here. What's going on, Don?
Hey, fellas, happy Tuesday for you, and hopefully see you guys at our favorite place every Tuesday, Social Taco today.
We will be there later, but we'll be there.
Damien, you gonna come by again, buddy?
Yeah, still got to pay the bills, Don. But if I'm available, yes, I will love to come by.
Well, you know, we're gonna take care of you up there. We all of us always.
I'm not worried about that. I still got to. There's still work obligations I have to do. I'm still on the clock.
I understand, buddy. You know, I understand. I got to go in and work a little while this morning myself, and then go back and work tonight. But hey, guys, on your discussion, Mississippi State and Florida, you know, they're right there at the bottom, and I guess we'll find out about them this weekend. They play each other this weekend, and real quickly, I texted y'all this morning. Right now, you can get a ticket to that for $9.
Hey.
You know what I'm saying? So PG, if you want to see your Gators play, you got to drive to start. Well, guys, I know y'all got to go. I hear the music. I will see y'all this afternoon.
All right, big dog. Good to hear from you, man. Yeah, you can get games cheap. You can get the tickets cheap.
It's cheaper than it costs more to go to the game and get a beer inside the game than it would to get a ticket to go to the game. It's going to be a tough year, but we get a chance to see it. That game's at 11 o'clock, so fresh out of college game day, you get Florida and Mississippi State, baby. Loser has to hire Billy Napier as their head coach. We'll see where it goes. McElroy and Kublik in the morning. Those guys are next.